There was a bulletin board in China where people voted their favorite gacha games that got posted a while back. A red pin means that you like said game, black means you dislike it. You have your usual suspects like Genshin, Arknights, Fate Grand Order, Reverse 1999, Snowbreak, and so on. Amidst this board, there is one game that stands out quite a bit. This one, here. With only measly 4 pins, what game is this? Looking at their promotional material and website, it looks unusually polished for a game where it could pass off as one of those mainstream gachas that rank high in the monthly revenue PvP charts. Except that's far from the truth. If I'd summarize what to think about Ash Echoes, it would be unremarkable, just plain to the extreme. It has a pretty outer layer, except once you dive a little deeper, you'll realize why this game virtually gets no mentions by most gacha players. My name is Psyche, and I want to cover a gacha game that's more or less forgotten. Having almost no relevance in the global market, the game still hangs on to life to this day via its Chinese player base. But what game is this exactly? Despite having some impressive graphical presentation, why hasn't this game even taken off somewhat? So after a week-long playtime, let's find out if Ash Echoes is worth playing or not. The game is developed by Neocraft and originally launched on November 13, 2024 globally, but the CN server had it for a year longer, so it's been a while since it was released. There was a Steam client at some point, but they discontinued it. Its updates and social media sites are still going, though I just find it a bit of a shame since there aren't many people to see the amount of quality the game has put into its marketing. I did see a few sponsored videos when the game first launched, but it never had a staple enough following to get the game out there via word of mouth. Let's just launch the game and see where it goes from there. What's the story like? While it does try its best to build up its own world and lore, does it have the classic Chinese gacha trope of introducing many confusing jargon and lore in the beginning that makes you have less grasp of the story? Yes, very much so. From what I can gather, you're the CEO of an energy company whose methods are not universally liked by the public, although there are alternate timeline themes where your character remembers events differently than other characters, so you can't argue they have the good old amnesiac protagonist trait. I would just briefly show some of the info dumps. It's understandable that with all these characters and lore thrown at you, the onboarding experience is not optimal. I don't know why some developers think front-loading large amounts of info at you in the beginning makes for good stories, but it looks like this trend will be continuing. I wasn't able to get control of the menu screen until like over an hour into the game, as you're expected to play the entirety of the prologue first. There is voice acting in both Chinese and Japanese, and the 2D sprites are also animated. I was surprised that even though the gameplay avatars are much smaller in size, they still bothered to make 3D models for the skill cutscenes and for the main lobby. The art style certainly has its own flair to it, though I thought the 3D models sometimes had a slight sense of uncanniness to it, almost like my thumbnails. Maybe I just have to spend more time getting used to the style though. Okay, but what about the gameplay? A story might be out for some, but if the gameplay is fun, then there's still hope left. The best genre I can describe it is that it's a blend of real-time strategy and tower defense. There's a central point of interest that you have to protect, and you can place units on a grid for their starting location. Enemies will start pouring in from all different directions, with many environmental hazards or enemy types to deal with. I found that some stages have gimmicks where enemies in a circle of light will be stunned, or how bosses have protective shields that some units can pierce. While in the level, you can click on an ally to reposition them to a different grid or use one of their attacks. This is where it gets interesting though. You can actually bring up to 8 different units into a team, but only 4 of them will be on field at a time. This is due how you can just freely swap in your reserves at any time. The catch is that I found that the unit's skills don't have infinite uses. When the level goes on for long enough, your allies can only do basic attacks or reposition, so that's likely when you'll be bringing in the reserve team. As you can see, there will be degrees of nuance and complexity when it comes to the gameplay. There is an auto mode, and that will probably get you quite far, but I imagine some bosses and challenges will require manual play. It certainly feels different gameplay-wise, just that I felt like when you get to a certain point, micromanaging all these cooldowns and choosing skill directions just makes it too tedious. For a bit of trivia, in the first alpha test of Arknight's Enfield, you had to do something similar, where you have to individually choose where each unit unleashes their skill. This was eventually removed as feedback showed players thought it was too much micromanagement in an action game. In my opinion, you shouldn't make gacha games too action-intensive. And certain games out there have balanced this quite well. Some action gachas only have you focus on one character on field at a time. While it's mechanically complex, your entire focus is honed in on one point. Real-time strategy games can have micromanagement, but it's not really needed every single second. Turn-based games can afford to increase the complexity, and that's due to you getting unlimited time to think every turn. More complexity doesn't automatically make a game better, and I feel this has also bled into other portions of Ash Echoes. The progression system is sorta weird. It does some familiar methods to the popular gacha games, but it also has its own spins on a few of them. For one, you don't have leveling. Well, you still have character ascensions, but that's it. The max ascension level is dependent on your player rank. I was at first confused when it said officer rank, so I thought maybe the units do have some weird hidden level that I wasn't aware of. Only then was it when I realized it actually refers to player level. To get the resources for the ascension mats, it's very easy. Just sweep the level that it drops a few times with stamina. No problem, but there's also other avenues for upgrades. This game does have a weapon system, sort of. They take on the form of these cards that you can place onto the leader of a team. You then have to do this roguelike dungeon mode with a unit to curate stats and other passive abilities for them. It's kinda like Uma Musume, but not really, where you can equip 6 different cards, then you go through challenges and decisions to pick out the stats you want. By the end of it all, you can allocate your points into different abilities that will affect all sorts of units in the game. This is then stored as a save data, and you can use that unit as the leader of a team in which the stats you gain from that run will be distributed and the perks will be active when your team comp looks a certain way. To my knowledge, the same cards are not used elsewhere, so it only applies to this roguelike mode. But obviously will still matter a lot since they can determine the stats you end up with on that run. Here's where it gets tricky though. Instead of allocating like a few hundred points on simple buffs to your stats, this game gives you like 3,000 points at the end. And all the buffs you can pick only apply to some of the units in the game. There is a lot on the list, and I feel like it will overwhelm some new players. I think what they had in mind was that you could pick out save data that's curated towards a specific team or synergy. And I think that's kinda cool if it's true, except this is pretty complex for a gacha game. I didn't see anything in the way of RNG gearing, though I feel like the progression system is sort of framed after Arknights, so I don't think they have it. There is, however, skill leveling that requires more mats farmed from the campaign, and additional stat boosts that require its own currency that's passively gained from the base building mode, and these upgrades take real-life time to complete, though you can queue up multiple ones at a time. The dupe level goes up to 5 additional copies, and some of them do give additional passive abilities. Well, hey, maybe this is an argument that it's okay for all gacha game progression systems to look similar, since you just might get confused if it's too different. Ash Echoes does their progression in a couple different ways than most gacha games, and it's gonna take you a while to get used to. Alright, time to go gambling. What's the gacha system like? Well, the rarities are split into 4, 5, and 6 stars, just like Arknights. For the rate-up banner, the base chance of a 6-star is 1.2%, with the rate-up being the coin toss at 50%. The pity starts at 60 pulls, and the rate increases 6% for every subsequent pull. This means the hard pity is just under 80 pulls. If you miss the rate-up, then the next SSR will be the rate-up. Goes without saying, pity does carry over. The cards have a different rate than the characters. It's a 2% with the same 50-50 rate up, but the soft pity starts at 40 pulls, with the subsequent pulls gaining an additional 11% chance. This means you'll likely get one at around 45 pulls. Each pull costs 300 of this vile currency, so a 10 pull is 3,000. From what I've seen, the game is pretty generous with the pulls when you log in. Those are 10 tickets for either the character or the cards banner. But I was min-roll gaming when I played, so you'll probably have better luck. The gacha system is pretty average if you ask me. Although, one benefit of the game that some players may like is that it has a fairly balanced gender ratio in its roster, so there's something for the husbando enjoyers too. Look at the newest rate-up character Yisang. Si Yang. In case you're under the belief that most gachas with mixed genders heavily skew towards females, this game proves otherwise. These games do exist, just incredibly rare, and no one knows about them. The cash up is also pretty standard. You have whale bait packs for various amounts of money, the $5 monthly pack for around 20 pulls, and the skins that are usually sold at around $15 to $20 each. These look pretty good, and imagine it would change up the 3D models too. Again, if you wanted an equal balance of waifus and husbandos, this game might just be for you. The rates are average to generous depending on the free income that's provided. I don't see a reason for anyone to tune out specifically due to the monetization, so I really can't say it's at fault for its mediocre performance player-wise. Okay, so hopefully you've been given a taste of the game overall. The story and graphical presentation is not spectacular, but certainly not cheap by any means. The gameplay has degrees of depth and nuance. The progression system does not have RNG gearing, but does have some layers of grind through its roguelike mode. Gacha is pretty typical with generous rewards, and the cash shop is pretty average too. By all means, it's got some unique ideas going on. Except, if the game is fairly decent, why isn't it more popular for the 1.5 years it's been live? I hear almost no buzz over this game at all, and its growth is non-existent, despite having some truly polished trailers and websites. You would think there should be at least some rumbling from fans when discussions of gacha games come up. Well, if you ask me, I think there are two reasons. The first, I would summarize Ash Echoes as a fairly high-effort product with virtually zero cultural significance. One part is that I suspect players will just lose interest with the story in the prologue. I think games should have a simple story premise and slowly build it up over time, or have some kind of emotional hook to catch the player's attention. To be fair, some gacha games considered to have good stories still do similar things, except that was when the genre hasn't exploded in popularity yet. I think a lot of the drop-off is from the overly complex gameplay system, as well as the obsession where the story has to be extremely convoluted in order to feel there's a lot of depth to it. I mean, just download the game, sit through the 1-hour-long forced prologue session, and tell me how much you vibe with the story or characters. Chances are you're gonna be bored by the end of it, assuming you even make it that far. Another thing is that none of the characters really pop out at me. I do appreciate the effort and care they put into modeling and designing them, just that when you run marketing for gacha games, the character design is probably the one thing to capitalize on. You want to wow a potential new player with a single picture of a character, and make them go, I want to try this game. Alternatively, the game can just do collab characters to at least get some people interested from adjacent fanbases. Just collab with anything except Persona 5. The second reason Ash Echoes isn't more popular is that, to be honest, sometimes I think whether a game succeeds is also just dependent on luck. This can be a lucky break when a big amount of online influencers all try out the game at the same time, when a piece of marketing somehow goes viral, or when something within the game just resonates with a lot of players so they keep playing, resulting in a steady growth. A lot of games spread their soft power through memes and the like. This can either be a huge hit and the devs just run with it while fans spread the meme to those unaware, though sometimes they can be a bit self-contained within the fanbase of that game only. Ash Echoes, however, just never had a mascot character or punchline that people can spread to places. If you had to recommend your favorite video game or gacha game as briefly as you can, how easily can you come up with something? Not just if the game does something well, I mean, plenty of games do things well, but what's something that only this game can provide? In my opinion, a game either needs to have a good story or good gameplay to have a good shot at succeeding. I can even provide examples of each of these cases. KL Zero Nightmare is a recent one with great gameplay, but pretty forgettable story. On the other hand, this is just my 2 cents by the way, I'm not that fond of Limbus Company's gameplay, but the lore and world building is insanely well done. There might also be cases where the stars align, and both the gameplay and story are good. Something else to ask is that, will it also provide this experience in the first 2 or so hours of a new player joining? People have many options and other commitments these days. Taking too long for the game to get good is just not very enticing. Now, part of me believes that just shoving sponsorships in people's faces can also work, even if the game itself is just average, like what Dragon Traveler did. This game came and went, and in its lifetime so far, it doesn't appear that its fate will be changing soon. The problem with an average or just decent game not taking off somewhat immediately when it launches is that it would have to rely on a steady stream of marketing and word of mouth to grow. If it has no striking features or a main selling point, then it might be harder for it to stick with an audience. Then the possible death spiral begins where you don't have an influx of capital to improve the game and push more marketing, in which the existing player base starts dying out. Conversely, if you look online, there's hardly anyone making content on the game that wasn't over a year ago. If a game hits the ground running with its launch, then it can enter a positive feedback loop in the community where like-minded people that like the same game will interact with each other, which creates more buzz and possibly attracts newcomers. Ash Echoes, at least to me, feels like a decently polished game that's also just fairly unremarkable. Anyways, that's my thoughts on Ash Echoes after trying it out for a week or so. Let me know if you played it or you'll be trying it out too. This game still appears to be chugging along for now, but only time will tell if it will be prosperous in the future. This has been my attempt at covering lesser-known gachas to see if they deserve a spotlight, so I'd be curious if there are other underperforming games to check out too. Anyways, if you want to see more gacha-related content like this, subscribe to the channel. You can support for as little as $2 a month on Patreon. As always, thank you for watching, be sure to spend moderately, and have fun out there.